IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I'm Megha Pardhi. I'm currently working as the research analyst in Takshashila Institution. Today, I'll be talking with Harshit Kukreja, who is my colleague at Takshashila. In today's episode, we are discussing recent measures initiated by Chinese government to encourage women to have more children and some of the reasons behind them. So in recently concluded 2 sessions, Chinese policymakers discussed various measures to encourage women to have more children. This included lowering marriage age, some suggested lifting all the family planning restrictions, some suggested stepping up measures to boost countries' low birth rate. This was also because around 2019, China's total fertility rate dropped to 1.3 from its peak of 6.3 around in 1960s. And the women of childbearing age have also dropped by around 30%. So, of course, this has an effect on countries' demographic dividend, and this has become a cause of concern among Chinese policymakers. So, to discuss this and the topic, we have Harshit today with us. Harshit, welcome.
Hi, Megha. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Megha, what exactly is you use the word protonist? Pro, some pro.
Proto-natalist measures.
Yeah. What exactly is that?
Yes, so proto-natalist measures are usually the policy decisions which are designed to encourage people to have more children.
So China now wants its population to have more children. Earlier,
Yes.
they wanted people to not have children, and they
Yes.
want people now to have more children.
Yeah,
That is
so
the
I think
main
yeah, that's
gist.
the gist. Yeah, around 1980s, they had this one-child policy, and it was recently removed in 2016. And so before that, only one child, like Chinese people were allowed to have one child. And now that birth rates are decreasing very rapidly, and because of that, demographic dividend is also decreasing. So now China is worried that it will be, not good for economy. So they want people to have more children. So now there is a 3-child policy. So basically, they want people to have more children. Of course, there is a catch though. Even though it's mentioned that 3 children are allowed, but if you have more children, you won't be punished as such. It's just that the benefits which you can have for 3 children, like maternity leave and some other benefits, that you cannot have.
So this is similar to what we have in India. For instance, you are not punished if you have more than 2 children, but you're not allowed to, I think, stand in some panchayat elections, hold some government jobs in certain states. So
Yes.
so earlier it was that you could not have more than 1 children. I've heard stories, I don't know how true they are, that the government used to take away kids if you had more than one. Are they true?
In China?
Yeah.
Honestly, I haven't heard such stories. Maybe my reading is not that good in that area because I haven't read any stories as such. But there are stories about people using some illegal methods to abort girl children, which also happens in India, by the way. Basically, if you're allowed only one child, then people would prefer that that child is a male and not a female. And some people you also used to abandon girl children if at all they are born. So yeah, that used to happen. That stories I have heard.
Oh, so same horror, but different stories.
Yeah,
Ah,
of course. Yeah, same or a different story.
so what difficulties is China facing? Like they're trying to increase their fertility rate. What difficulties are they facing right now?
So yeah, they have changed policies, of course, but just change in policy does not mean people will automatically start to have more children. for a very long time they have been accustomed to, pamper just one child or live a life like that. Now, the suddenly with one more child, there are a lot of different costs associated. Like education cost is there, then you have to do a number of other things, medical cost. So being able to afford that is also one of the concern. And then women generally don't prefer to have more children because it affects their career. And Chinese society, like Indian society, is also very patriarchal. So, for example, if a woman gets pregnant after joining a position and has to take a leave, then it affects her career. It affects her educational prospects a lot. So there are a lot of examples like this. So that is also one of the reason. And then there is this recently one trend that has been observed that young people don't want to get married at all. So, I mean, of course, if they don't want to get married because of the other, social and economical concerns associated with marriage, then of course the question of child is also out of picture. And then there is another thing. Many women prefer to remain single these days. And in China, there's a law that single women cannot use, this other techniques to like in vitro fertilization and that kind of techniques to get pregnant or to their children. So because of that, also there are a lot of concerns. So these are the some key points which are causing these problems.
So China tried to regulate what was basically a social issue, but I think they were successful for a few years. This is the
Yeah,
long term consequences of that same
yeah,
policy. They were quite
yeah.
successful.
I
And
mean, sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, as you said, they were quite successful there with the one-child policy because if you see graph of China's, fertility, it quite nicely goes down and quite fast after the one-child policy was implemented. But yeah, of course, this is a long-term consequences which probably they didn't have in mind at that time.
so this could have been fixed if they had like made a course correction maybe 10, 15 years earlier.
There is a fact, or is it like this is statistical kind of fact that if a country's fertility rate goes below 1.5, it's considered very bad and kind of irreversible. It's more likely to get trapped in that population cycle, reduce, lowering population, aging population cycle. But China is China, so there is a possibility that if they just force people to have more children, I don't know. This is a weird way to say this, but there have been many kind of policies which are not otherwise possible in other countries, but they have been done in China. So probably maybe there is still no hope for hope.
So the replacement rate is somewhere around 2.1. So if the total fertility rate of a population falls below 2.1, so the population starts decreasing. And everything that happens at the percentage of working population decreases, and the number of people who are dependent on the working population increase. So yeah, I think below 1.5, 1.4 is a bad thing if you consider that. Yeah, it's a bad thing for in general and for, but China, I think China has played it quite well. They have used their population dividend to a large extent. They are like, they were growing super fast. They have become one of the largest economies. Maybe they'll supersede US. I don't know, 1, 5, 10 years, or maybe they don't, but they're quite near as far as I can remember. And they have pulled a lot of people out of poverty. So
Yeah.
even though their policy had some long term consequences, I think it was, I don't know, can you call it a good move?
Good move as a one child policy. I think for that, at that time when it was implemented, as I said, around 1960s, of fertility rate was around 6. And for a country which is aspiring to become a developed country and trying to turn their economy into a pulling a lot of people out of poverty, controlling birth rate is also kind of a necessity. So for them, it did work. I won't term it a good policy or bad policy because if you closely look, any policy can be termed as a good for certain things and bad for certain. But it did work for them. But now, like for example, now by 2050, they want to be a tech powerhouse. For that, they need young population which is working and young population which is actively contributing. And if this trend continues, then it's going to be bad for them. So, of course, continuing that policy, the policy which was good earlier cannot be continued because it's not a good policy now. Yeah, that's my perspective on this.
So I think we were talking about an article which framed the argument about quality and quantity, the quality of the population, the education, the health of the population. So with rising automation and the need for labor force decreasing, I think, because if you are a service based industry, you don't need as many people as you would need if you were agriculture based or industrial based. So I don't think it would be necessary for China to increase its population, to increase its working population. And I don't think it's that easy. If you're like, you have for the past 5, 6 decades, you have told your population that you have to have one child, one child, one child. You have ingrained that in your culture. And suddenly you want we should shift to three child or two child. And you cannot like, it's not like a video game. You cannot pull levers and switches and you cannot control population rise and expansion. You can maybe nudge it, but I don't think you can control it. As
Yeah, so this is nudging. You see, I mean, when our top, policymaking body or even top leaders or and China does it very smoothly. By the way, they'll publish articles by leaders. They lead courage. They'll have some, what is called. I don't want to say prize, but what do you say when there's something some encouraging measures to especially to women to have more children. They're even talking about lowering age of marriage so that there is this thinking that if you get just married early you automatically become more responsible and start thinking about family. So if you get married early, there is this social kind of belief that if you get married early you get responsible and start thinking about children and having family. So of course then they are also talking about lowering age of marriage so that it's easier for young people to get married. I mean it's kind of wild, but yeah, that is it. So now that we know what China is doing. And of course, there are a lot of other things like encouraging more women to have jobs plus children and making it easier for women to have jobs plus children.
so, before we talk about India, Megha, I wanted to ask you: do you think China's one-child policy was a nudge? I don't think it was a nudge. It was like quite forceful and quite harshly implemented.
Yeah. So when I said that nudge, it was for the current policy. Like currently, they're trying to nudge. Of course, one child policy, it was quite controversial. And frankly, there have been reports that about the one child policy that many people have taken some extreme measures and some extreme measures were also taken by government. So, and that has caused a lot of trauma among people. So, I mean, yeah, I can't say that was a nudging. There's a lot of forceful implementation also. Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to clarify whatever I have read for a long time, I did not see any indication that China's one child policy was a nudge. So yeah, I think the policy they are now trying to implement, the three child push, is sort of a nudge. Is in a nudge state right now.
Currently, you can say yes. And I just remembered actually something. I mean, this is a very kind of, very difficult story, I must say, which I did hear. And so there's this thing that which I read. It said that whenever, there were extra children born, doctors would kind of, were forced to kill those children and induce artificial labors to and then kill children. So there were things like this, and I just remembered it now. And yeah, so that was quite
That is not a nudge.
disturbing, I must say. That is
Megha,
not a
not a
nudge. That's
nudge.
a disturbing. Yeah, that is not a nudge, of course. That's disturbing.
So
But the current policy which allows children, so I don't know how can you force people to have more children? When had to remove, when had to force people not to have children, probably there was some scope to, force and do these kind of things. When it comes to forcing people to have children, I'm not sure what can be done.
Maybe
I'm not exploring. I'm just, I'm just casting my.
maybe they'll form incentives that are more inclined towards having more children. You get a
Yeah, so incline, if you're giving incentives, then it counts as a nudge, right?
yeah, it's sort of a gentle no incentive, as in you can only send your children to a public school if you have two children or
Mm-hmm.
more than two children.
Hmm.
So that is not a gentle incentive. A gentle incentive would be 100. What's the currency for China? Yuan. Yeah, you get 100
Yeah.
yuan every month or whatever every quarter if you have an extra child. So that is, I think, a gentle nudge. And if you are removing access to education, health, that is not so gentle. That is like quite forced. So before we move on to India and before we move on to demographics in general and what we can learn, I think we should take a quick break.
Sure.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Storytellers and Storytellers, Vineet talks to Gully Rap OG, The Evil, aka Dhaval Parab. The Evil shares his journey from rapping for his friends in school to rapping with Ranveer Singh in Gully Boy. On Press Decode, Sarah Vagda and Prafula talk about the Indian entry to the Academy Awards, Writing with Fire, and Will Smith's infamous slap. On Think Fast, Varun and Suchita cover acquisitions in fintech, fantasy sports, and debate over work from home versus work from office. On Ek Chuski Finance, Priyanka introduces us to the interesting concept of financial makeup. And on Postcards from Nowhere, Utsa weaves a story that connects the Portuguese, banned languages, and grinding songs. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you might be listening to us on. And do check us out on YouTube. We're building a whole bunch of different channels. You can find them on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And we're also doing a small listener survey, which we would really appreciate your help with. It helps us kind of talk to advertisers. So you could go to ivmpodcast.com/survey. It'll just take a couple of minutes and it would be really helpful to us. We do appreciate this. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance and the India Water Portal. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Hello and welcome back to All Things Policy. Before we jump to our earlier discussion with Megha about India's policies and population dividend in general, I would like to let you guys know that the applications for Takshila's public policy courses are now open. The graduate certificate course in public policy is a 3 month course. There are 3 specializations from which you can choose: defense and foreign affairs, tech and policy, and advanced public policy. You can visit our website for more information. It is a very good course which will give you a nice primer to public policy. So, jumping back to population dividend, Mika, as we were discussing, so basically, population pyramids are of. There's a, have you seen those graphs which is in shape of a pyramid divided by age group and male and females on both sides?
Yeah, they're quite spectacular in some cases.
Yeah, it's like the magic of data visualization, how much you can see and how many trends you can see by looking at that one picture. It's like quite fun to look at them. So basically, they are of broadly divided into 3 categories. One is where there is fertility rate is also high and mortality rate is also high. So the pyramid is broad at the base, and this is called as expansive. Yeah, the expansive kind, and there's a triangle in the graph. So the second one is the constructive type, in which there's lower mortality rate and fertility rate is basically constant, and there's a bulge in the middle. And the third type is sort of like stationary, where there are like a low mortality and no fertility rate, and it's more of a sort of a pillar shaped. So this is how, and population trends follow journal trajectory and how the population develops and how the country develops. And this is the trend. We'll follow what the Western countries had like 100 years ago. So we'll go that way.
Yeah, that this reminds me. I think China's population pyramid is a bulging in the middle kind of pyramid. But anyway,
Yeah,
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 I mean, enough about China. So tell me, what is the situation in India? And I mean, just a little primer about how is India's fertility rate, and what is the situation of our demographics?
So we are currently somewhere in the second stage on the second type. Our fertility rate is kind of falling constant and the mortality rate is decreasing at a better rate. So fertility rate, according to the latest National Family and Health Survey, the fifth one, it has fallen to 2.0, the total fertility rate. And for replacement, we want 2.1. So eventually our population will be in a constructing phase. But NFHS data is not that reliable. We better wait for census data, but the trend is going along those lines. So overall, I think southern India, the southern states are much. They have a lesser fertility rate as compared to northern states, basically as Bihar, and the other states are slowly reaching the replacement rate somewhere around 2.1, except UP and Bihar. The decrease is it's like quite far from what we want it to be. And yeah, so we are at a stage where we have a large working population and the population is quite young. And the dependents, that is the population which is dependent on the working population, that is the older population, and the young population is quite small. So this is the right time to reap the benefits of our population dividend. This is the correct time. This is the time when China took advantage of this and yeah, and got and boosted its economy and stuff like that.
Yeah, this reminds me of a very funny incident actually. Funny, I mean, yeah, funny for me, funny on a surface level. So a few days ago, I think there was a social media post which kind of went viral in China that India is going to surpass China in population, and people were like so worried. It was taken down, I suppose, later. It was proven to be fake, I think, later. But basically, that kind of, triggered a kind of debate that, I mean, how is it that India has already surpassed China? I mean, there are some prediction that at some point that might happen, but I think that kind of also that post to gain that kind of traction, it kind of, amazed me. Yeah. So
I think we
yeah,
are bound to surpass China. I think 10, 15 years ago, I did see that post. It said that we have already surpassed China in its population. Yeah, I did see the post, but we'll have to again wait for census data. But we will have a bigger population than China in maybe 10 years or something.
yeah, but
Maybe
I
the
always sorry. I just had this quick doubt. I always thought that having more population is kind of a bad thing. I mean, I don't know. Somehow I just very feel that being a largest, most populous country in the world is not something actually to be celebrated for.
so
I don't know.
you can take you can take advantage of that. That is a very good position to take advantage. If you educate your population, if you make them more healthier, if you give them more jobs, if you increase female participation in the population, you can have wonderful results for the country. You can pull more people out of poverty. Obviously, we don't want population to increase more, but we do not also want to artificially like suppress it with a very stringent one child policy. We have some kind of a two child policy where we push, if you want certain government jobs in certain states, you should have less than two children. If you want to be a participant in local elections, if you want to be elected in local elections, you should have less than two children. That is, and certain insurance and certain incentives, that is all right. But we don't want to like push our population that way. It can be taken advantage of. If you know, that is the same thing. Now, if you have a large family, you can see it both ways. You have a lot of mouths to feed, but you also have a lot of hands to work. So it can go both ways. If the population has opportunities, and if the population is scaled appropriately and is healthy, so it can be very helpful it can contribute. They can contribute a lot to your GDP and your growth as a nation.
So basically, if you want to reap benefits of this increasing population, we probably need to invest more in skilling this population, right? And making them healthier, correct?
Yeah. So you need to invest more in secondary education. You need to invest more in technical education. You need to invest, and you also need to invest appropriately according to what is the demand from the market and upskill them. Unless you upskill them, and for instance, we took advantage of our English. We have a large English speaking population. We took advantage of that when we became sort of a BPO hub for the whole world. That was because of our large English speaking population, and we currently do have a lot of cheap labor. So it can be quite advantageous. And obviously, we have to invest more in our healthcare. We cannot be like investing 1-2% of our GDP and expect our population to be healthier with so much of people living below poverty line.
Yep. So one of the things China is also doing to encourage participation, female participation in economy is to, especially in the STEM fields, they're giving them like the equal wages. They're trying to reduce this wage gap. They're giving them more leaves. And I think in 2011, there's also this policy by Ministry of Science and Technology, where in one of the awards, it's called Young Scientist Award, something like that, they increase the age limit to apply. So earlier it was just 35 years of age. Now women up to 40 years of age can also apply. And it has given some results, like more women are getting that funding. So they have seen a positive result there. So in India, do you think in India we need this kind of policies to increase female workforce participation?
Yeah, we do need certain policies which can push and help women participate in the economy more. And that is sort of our potential, which we have not tapped successfully, because you cannot leave half the population out of the economy and expect you to go, the country to grow at 8, 9, 10%. We do want a lot more females to participate. And you also have to take social dynamics and family dynamics into the equation, so that you have to help them a little more as when you'll help maybe the male participant, because the female has the responsibilities of the family. She's expected to put larger share of her of work in child rearing and more in housework. And a lot of people are not interested in investing in education for the girl child. So it makes sense for the government to push towards more education and everything else for the female population of our country. It would be quite helpful if we can do that. And unless we do that, I don't think we can grow a lot. That would be, I think China has a lot better participation of females as compared to India.
Yes. So according to the latest data by World Bank, female for labor force participation rate in China was around 60%. And for that India, I think it's around 19 or 20% something. 19%.
So 1/3.
Oh yeah. That's way less than China, by the way.
So I had expected the data I had read. I think that was the old data that was like 25 or 30%, but the latest data you say indicates 19%. So that's like
Yeah,
way.
but interestingly, this China's labor force participation rate has actually decreased. I just saw this World Bank data. So in the 1990s, around it was 73 something, and it decreased to 61 in 2020. So again, that is a different trend altogether. But of course, India's rate is just way less. It was shocking to me also when I read it first time.
So we're obviously not using our full potential of the labor force. We are wasting our potential and by not including females in the economy.
Yeah.
It's quite sad. So we don't have to talk about like advanced policies, measures, if we are not able to get our basics right. So
Mm-hmm.
20 and 60 is like a huge margin.
Mm-hmm.
We have to increase participation of females in the workforce. Unless we do that, we cannot enjoy the population dividend that a large young working population brings to a country. I think as compared to other South Asian countries who were in similar place maybe a decade or two ago, our growth has been like quite sluggish. Maybe these are few of the reasons why this has been. But I think South Korea and Singapore are also quite patriarchal, and the females are not as independent, and the norms and the social norms and the family ties are quite restrictive,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. South Korean society, Japanese society, basically in general, Asian societies are considered to be kind of patriarchal. So these kind of the issues which we face in India that are also same for this society, like some of the issues which women face, and that including including decreasing fertility rate, by the way. So even though Korea's female labor force participation has increased over the years, there are some issues which have not been solved. Like there are a lot of women's rights issues that continue to haunt that society. So there's a lot to do there also. Yeah, but in China again, these kind of problems have been regularly in public debate. For example, around 2018, state-sponsored media took a poll on Weibo, and they basically asked that should we allow single women to have children using this assisted reproduction technology. And that poll gave very positive results. So I mean that was a good trend.
So, were there any policy changes after that poll and after this public debate?
No, no. So this is still a debate. In fact, there was one woman who actually sued a hospital also that they didn't allow her to freeze her eggs and to have a child later. So that battle is going on. There are no policy changes as of now. But again, public sentiment is quite. There is a lot of heated debate going on in this topic. On this topic.
Although the government can like push you in some directions in which we want the citizens to go, but I think it is better to allow people to choose. Obviously, you can give certain incentives and gentle nudges in whatever direction you wanted the people to go, but you should not be as restrictive as China's policy. Being able to adopt and there are laws in India have been changing, and we now have certain laws which, yes, for instance, in India, single women can adopt and also undergo IVF. Yeah, but we also need to change our social norms so that we increase women participation in the economy and get the dividends of the golden period of the population growth. If we don't do that, we would have missed a golden opportunity and would not be able to get millions out of poverty.
Yeah. And somehow we also need to remember that taking extreme measures is probably not a good thing in long term. That's what we learned from this China experience, right?
Yeah, and also you cannot control the population so precisely that you cannot like pull a button and expect people to have more children now and less children then. Because these policies have decades long implications and they have long term effects. And also, you don't want to, at least in India, we don't want to restrict people's rights a lot. We want a free society and we want to respect individual rights as well. So I don't think China's restrictive measures should be and can be applied to India.
Yeah. So, yeah, of course. So this was a quite an engaging discussion, and thank you so much for joining us today, Harshit.
Oh, thanks, Megha. Thanks for having me.
That's it, folks. That's it for today.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, Check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.
सफर, रास्ते, मंजिल और मुकाम अक्सर ये हमसे कुछ कहना चाहते हैं, पर हम हैं कि अपनी रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में इन्हें सुनने से कतराते हैं। नमस्ते दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है केशव चतुर्वेदी और मैं आपको ले चलूंगा कुछ ऐसे सफर पर जहां आपको एक नया नजरिया मिलेगा सफर और मंजिलों को देखने का। आइए इन किस्से कहानियों में डूब जाएं। हर मंगलवार और शुक्रवार